want to tell you a story that feels like it shouldn't be real. It's the kind of story that makes you pause and ask, wait, can that even happen in America? But it did. And it's happening right now. It's about a man named Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's at the center of a legal and political storm that goes straight to the heart of what it means to have rights in this country. And yeah, it's messy. But I want to take you inside that mess, unpack what happened, and ask, if it happened to him, why couldn't it happen to you? If you've ever taken a U.S. civics class or just watched Schoolhouse Rock, you probably remember that the U.S. government is split into 3 branches: legislative, judicial, and executive. The legislative branch, Congress, writes the laws. The judicial branch, our courts, interprets those laws. And the executive branch, its job is to enforce them. This balance isn't just a fun trivia fact. It's the spine of American democracy. When one branch tries to do the other's job, things go sideways. Quickly. And that's exactly what happened with Kilmar. In the United States, the president, the executive branch, doesn't make laws. That's Congress's job. And the president doesn't decide what's constitutional either. That's the job of the courts. The executive enforces the law. That's it. In theory, anyway. But this line has been getting blurry. And in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, that blur becomes dangerous. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was living in the U.S., and like thousands of others, he'd built a life here. But one day, he was detained by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The justification? Gang affiliation. And how did they know he was in a gang? Well, tattoos. That's it. No criminal charges, no conviction, just a tattoo and an assumption. And on that basis, the federal government decided to deport him. But here's the twist. Abrego had a court order specifically saying that he could not be deported to El Salvador. Not just any deportation, El Salvador. Why? Because the U.S. courts acknowledged that sending him there could result in him facing inhumane conditions, or worse, death. Still, the Trump administration put him on a plane and flew him straight to the very country he was told he couldn't be sent to. A prison in El Salvador, no less. Without a trial, without due process, without a legal hearing. And let's be clear, even undocumented immigrants, those who have entered the country illegally, are entitled to due process under the U.S. Constitution. Not necessarily a full-blown criminal trial with a jury and everything, because immigration cases are civil, not criminal. But they're supposed to get a hearing, notice, a chance to defend themselves before an immigration judge. Deportation isn't supposed to happen like flipping a light switch, especially when someone's life could be at risk. And even in cases of expedited removal, where officials try to shortcut the process at the border, there are limits. Especially when a court has already stepped in to say, you can't deport this person. Kilmar never even got that. Let that sink in for a moment. Here's what we know. Due process isn't just a legal phrase. It's a promise. It's what stands between us and chaos. It means that if the government accuses you of breaking the law, they have to prove it. In court, with evidence, before a judge, and before you lose your rights. Like, say, being kicked out of the country and dropped into a dangerous prison. But Kilmar never got that. He didn't go to trial. He wasn't charged with anything. Because if they had taken him to court, he probably would have been released. And the administration knew that. So they skipped the court. They skipped the process. They just deported him. And when the courts caught wind of what was happening and tried to stop it with a verbal order, Trump's people said, oops, plane's already in the air. Seriously, that was the excuse. After the deportation, the administration claimed it was all just a mistake, a paperwork issue, a miscommunication. But here's the thing. When a federal judge says don't do this and you do it anyway, that's not a mistake. That's defiance. And when that person ends up in a prison cell in a country you were explicitly told not to send them to, that's not just a bureaucratic snafu. That's a human rights violation. The court said bring him back, and Trump said no. The case escalated all the way to the Supreme Court, and the ruling was clear. The administration must facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. That doesn't mean wait at the border. That doesn't mean if he escapes prison, we'll consider letting him in. That means go get him. Now. Trump's team essentially said, we'll help if he can find his way back here. You can't make this stuff up. So now there's a new legal battle underway. Is the Trump administration in contempt of court? Because that's what this is turning into. When a court gives you a directive and you ignore it, that's contempt. It's not political theater, it's a crime. A judge asked the administration, on what legal basis did you deport this man? And the answer? It's secret. Seriously, that was the response. National security. But the judge shot that down. There is no national security threat here. And if there were, they'd need to prove it in court. But they haven't. They won't. Because again, if they had to make their case in court, Kilmar might be back in the US right now. Look, the immigration system in this country is complicated. No one is denying that. There are real conversations to be had about undocumented immigration, national security, and law enforcement. But that's not what this is about. Kilmar Abrego Garcia wasn't an undocumented immigrant. He wasn't convicted of a crime, and he had legal protections granted by a US court. He was supposed to be safe. This isn't about whether or not we should deport criminals. It's about whether we should follow the law before we do. It's about whether we still believe that rights apply to everyone, or just the people in power. This is where it gets real. If the government can ignore a court order, detain someone without trial, deport them to a known danger zone, and then refuse to bring them back even when the Supreme Court tells them to, who's next? What's stopping them from deporting you by mistake? Let's say you get flagged for something dumb, like a traffic violation, or a mistaken identity, or hell, a tattoo, and the system screws up. Are you going to get a hearing, a trial? Are you going to be protected? What if the administration just shrugs and says, oops, they were already on a plane? This isn't just about immigration. This is about precedent and what kind of power we're okay handing over to the executive branch. Because if they can do it to him, they can do it to anyone. If Donald Trump is so convinced that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a dangerous gang member, then there's a simple solution. Try him in court, present the evidence, let the system work. That's what due process is for. It's how we separate facts from fear. But that's not what happened here, and the refusal to go through the courts tells us everything we need to know. Because maybe, just maybe, they knew they didn't have a case. And that should scare all of us. This isn't just about Kilmar anymore. It's about whether executive power has any limits. It's about whether the law still applies when the president decides it's inconvenient. We have 3 branches of government for a reason. Congress makes the law. Courts interpret it. The executive enforces it. But when the executive branch starts playing judge and jury, we lose something essential. We lose the rule of law. And we lose the ability to say with confidence that this is a country where everyone is protected, even when it's hard, even when it's unpopular. As of right now, the administration is facing a contempt hearing. That's rare. And that's big, because it's not just about what they did, it's about whether they'll be held accountable. And accountability matters, because without it, the next time the court gives an order, the president might just ignore it again and again, until the courts don't matter anymore. Here's the bottom line. Kilmar Abrego Garcia had a tattoo. He was never charged with a crime. He was protected by a US court order. He was deported anyway. He now sits in a prison in El Salvador, alone, terrified, and forgotten by the administration that was supposed to protect him. The courts have said, bring him back. The administration said no. This isn't just a legal debate. It's a moral one. It's a test of whether we still care about justice, about law, about what it means to be American. And if we fail that test, well, what are we even doing? Look, I don't know Kilmar. I've never met him. But I do know what it feels like to want a system that plays fair, that keeps its promises, that doesn't look the other way when rights are violated. And that's why I'm telling you this story. Because it's not just about him. It's about all of us. About whether we can still look ourselves in the mirror and say, yeah, this is still a country of laws. Because if we can't say that, then we've already lost more than one man. We've lost the whole game. Now let me know in the comments, what do you think should happen next?